What's up? Today we're going to talk about finding the percent of something. Something we actually do in the real world all the time. You might be told that today's temperature is, 20% lower than yesterday. You might be told the price of a sweater is 13, that's a random number. How about 30% of what it used to be? Let's talk about the simple calculation of finding the percent of something. Let's pretend let's pretend it's dollars. Let's pretend something is $20. Perhaps a stuffed animal, a squishmallow, or something like that. It's $20. And you want to know what let's say 30% of that $20 is, because I'm making a hypothetical example that a grandparent has offered to pay the remaining amount if you pay 30% of the stuffed animal. Again, making this all up. So remember, and this is something that I always want you to remember, which is percent. So you have I don't like how I wrote that. Percent means per cent per 100, per 100. Because cent is another way of saying 100, and you know what per means. So per cent is per 100. So if you have 30%, it is the same as 30 out of 100, 30 100ths, 30 hundredths. So one way to solve the problem, what's 30% of 20, is to say 30 hundredths, and we're going to multiply that by 20 over 1. Now, you're probably, or maybe you're saying to yourself, well, why do we multiply? And I want to remind you, or tell you if you don't already know, that the word of in math almost always means to multiply. So if we want to know what's 1/3 of a whole pizza, of 8 pieces of pizza, we would multiply 1/3 times 8. If we want to know what's 1/2 of an amount of something, we actually use multiplication to find the answer. So of means multiply. And in this case with percentages, it's no different. So we've got 30 out of 100 times 20 over 1. It's, I think, easier to turn it into a fraction like this. And I use parentheses here because parentheses mean, when you have parentheses next to each other, it means to multiply. If you don't like doing it that way, you can also do 30 over 100 times 20 over 1. With junior high school students, I get out of the practice of using the multiplication sign for multiplication, because we are phasing that out because X is used too frequently in algebra. So now let's solve the problem that we have. 30 hundredths multiplied by 20, or 20 over 1. Well, there are a few different ways to do this, but if you just want to do straight multiplication across, 30 times 20 is 600. Remember, you multiply 3 times 2, and then you tack on the number of zeros to get the answer. And then 100 times 1 is 100. And then we can cross out the zeros. However many zeros you cross out at the top is however many zeros you can cross out at the bottom. And that is going to give us 6. So 30% of 20 is 6. So for this individual who wants to buy this stuffy, they will have to pay $6, and it looks like a grandparent will pay the remaining amount. Let's move a little faster here. Let's say I ask you, what is, let's not use a dollar sign, my bad. What is 25% of 50? What is 25% of 50? Again, we can use fractions to convert 25 to 25 hundredths. And this time we can use the dot symbol to signify multiplication. We're going to multiply that by 50, or 50 over 1. And we can just multiply straight across. You can do 25 times 50 to get the product for that. There is actually an easier way. If you've learned to cross multiply, we could turn, so here we have 50 over 100, which we can actually turn into 1/2. There is that way to do it too, and it makes for a much easier multiplication equation, because now I can say 25 times 1 is 25, and then 2 times 1 is 2, and then 25 over 2 I know is 12.5. I happen to know that by the way that I figured that out is I know that 2 goes into 25 12 times, and then I'm going to have 1 left over, so it's 12.5, which is 12.5. So that's one way. If your mind doesn't work like that yet, then you can always do it out. 25 over 2. And you can always do it out and get that. But in any event, 25% of 50 is 12.5. Let's do one more. How about something with harder numbers? 9% of, what is 9% of 7? Oh, now that is an interesting one. What is 9% of 7? Again, more than one way to solve this. One way is you can convert 9% to a fraction, 9 hundredths times 7 over 1. You will get 63 hundredths, which equals 0.63. Another way is to say, well, 9% is the same as 0.09. Some people automatically go straight to decimals in their head when they're converting percentages to another form. And so you could say 0.09 times 7, because remember, of means multiply. And then you can use multiplication. You can say 9 times 7 is 63. And then we've got, erase that little mark here. We've got 2 decimal points in our factors. 7 doesn't have any decimal points, but 0.09 has 2 decimal points. So we are going to move that over 2 times, and we get 0.63. So that's another way of doing it. Okay, let's just do one more just for kicks. One more just for kicks. Let's do, goodness, let's do 7% of 20. What is 7% of 20? Again, use any method you want. We could do 7 over 100 times 20 over 1, which is going to give us 140 over 100, which is 1.4. Oops, I don't like how I wrote that. 1.4. Because remember, 140 over 100, when we divide by 100, we move the decimal point, the number of zeros, over 0.4. So that's one way of solving it. Oops, my eraser. If you want to use decimals instead, you absolutely can do that. You can say 0.07 times 20, and then you can do the math out. 2 times 7 is 14, but we have a 0 there, so it's 140. And then we've got 2 decimal points, so we're going to move it over, and we get 1.4. So in the math class I teach, we are going to be practicing this quite a bit. And as with most, if not all things math, practice definitely makes progress. And so this is one of those things where the more you practice it, the better you get, and the more the more it becomes just instinct, the more practice you get. So till next time.